Did you just see that episode? My God, we need to talk about everything that happened in Ahsoka Episode 5, titled Shadow Warrior, directed by none other than Dave Filoni. I'm so happy to say that he really came through in this episode. And that wasn't me doubting him. I just, with everyone saying God Filoni and everything like that, I just didn't want to necessarily think this is guaranteed masterpiece, whatever's coming next episode last week. But I have to say, everything we just saw, it just fulfilled so many long fan desires. I'm going to stop rambling. I just want to get straight into this. Let me know your thoughts on what we saw with Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano this episode, and how we're also catapulting into Grand Admiral Thrawn and hopefully Ezra Bridger next episode. So right at the beginning, we have Jason coming out of the ship, and Hera hears something, and I'm not going to lie, guys. I'm going to say it again. I'm still kind of a bit sus of Hera bringing Jason along to a place where she is still suspecting that there could be a guy swinging a lightsaber. Like, would you really stand a chance against Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll? Just in case they were there, she would be force choked in an instant. But enough of that. Let's just get into the world between frickin' worlds. And there's a little bit of a debate about, is this the world between worlds really? Again, we'll talk more about that in a second, but we continue off with Anakin, and there's a little bit of an exchange there. It's like, oh, you look old. That's what happens. Ahsoka somewhat remembers that it was to do with Baylan Skoll, and Anakin says that's a good thing because it still means that she has a chance, and that is a chance to live. So the duration of this episode was kind of like somewhat of a final lesson from Anakin to Ahsoka. As he says himself, I'm here to finish your training. One is never too old to learn, Snips. What is the lesson? To live or die. Ahsoka says, I won't fight you, and he says, oh, I've heard that one before, which is, to me, blatantly a reference to Luke Skywalker saying, I won't fight you. So, all in all, just already off the bat here, I get what people were saying with how, like, where's the doorways in A World Between Worlds? What's going on here? Is this really Anakin Skywalker in Force Ghost mode because he should be glowing blue? I think that this isn't just a Force vision, and in that this is just the will of the Force guiding Ahsoka, pretending to be Anakin. The much more, and maybe this is my bias here, but with everything we're going to extrapolate during this breakdown, there's so many clues as to how it makes way more sense if during between life and death, in which Ahsoka is kind of experiencing right now in the real world, due to her connection with the Force, Anakin is a Force ghost at this point, post Return of the Jedi. I mean, we saw him at the end of Return of the Jedi, and this is their first time reconnecting with one another. But anyway, mini ramble out the way there. This is when we see Anakin swinging at Ahsoka, and we see Anakin go fast, pre-cool combat, pre-cool moves, and we see some of that littered throughout this episode. I absolutely love that. Now, this is when it cuts, and we go back to Hera, and we have Carson there saying that we're overdue at HQ, and Senator Organa, none other than Leia, a little bit of a reference there, says that she can only give us cover for so long. And that is because the New Republic are like being a little mosquito this episode. I kind of get it from their angle. I mean, after all, they've been incompetent this whole time, thinking that there isn't much proof here, there, and everywhere, where there literally has been holographic security recordings of Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati breaking out Morgan Elsbeth, freaking hyperdrive leaving Corellia at Morgan Elsbeth's shipyard. Did they need more proof? But I digress. They're not changing, so they're really wanting to know what the heck's going on with some stolen X-Wings, if you will. Not stolen, but they helped, obviously, Hera out with this little mission that she wasn't approved for. But we have Jason tell his mother that there's something out there in the water, something that he can feel. So she even listens in this moment, and it gets to the point of where it's like, when Hera listens, it's almost like she can hear it. Now, yeah, I guess there is the argument that everyone could be connected to the Force, but, I think maybe if Hera is hearing it in this moment, that this planet potentially, just like some other places and locations in the Star Wars universe, have strong connections to the Force. So I think that this planet in particular, especially with like the ruins there and whatnot, has quite a strong aptitude or affinity for the Force. So that's why, granted, Jason maybe has a lot more of a higher, yes, I'm going to say it, midichlorian count, so he can hear it a lot more. Maybe other people like Hera was even sensing it in this moment. This could even be how, conveniently for Ahsoka, between life and death, she connects to the world between worlds. I still take it as this is a realm she's connecting to with her Force spirit, if you will. Like, as what happens to you when you become a Force ghost outside of time and space. So I do believe, yes, that this is a Force ghost Anakin Skywalker. I am still sticking with what I said at the end of last week's review, that the reason why he doesn't glow blue here is that when this is where you go in the cosmic space outside of real space and time as a Force ghost, well, that means you can have more of your physical form there. But if you were to appear in the real plane, then that's where you come across a bit more like a freaking hologram. And so since Ahsoka is kind of in that space between death, this gives her that opportune moment to connect with her master. And so the fight continues with Anakin in this moment. And this is where I wrote down, like, I think people are being too hard on the de-aging. Now, I watched it on like a 4K OLED, and I thought it looked pretty damn decent. Now, what I won't deny is that there are one or two shots where I do kind of see what people mean. Like, there's the uncanny kind of application. But I'm normally quite a critic of CGI that is very questionable. I mean, I went pretty hard on the Flash movie, for example. But this, you know, it is only a little bit of application to Hayden Christensen's face. And there's many times where it looked so good. I was like, damn. But I do want to emphasize there are a few moments where it does get a little bit wobbly. It's almost like the smoothness was a bit more of a circular patch, and you could kind of see, why isn't that transitioning smoothly into his cheek kind of thing. But overall, I need to praise it. Whether we get to like the Clone Wars scenes, Siege of Mandalore, just all those little moments, I was like, damn, this looks really cool. Even this moment when he's attacking Ahsoka and you just have the movement and it's still fluidly staying quite smooth on his face, and I'm just seeing Revenge of the Sith Anakin. So this is where we have Anakin swipe the I'm going to call it the World Between Worlds bridge, and Ahsoka falls into the Clone Wars. And again, this is all a part of the training that he's giving her. And we see a younger Anakin, if you will, during the Clone Wars, leading the clone troopers with his clone armor there. This is just, I think, everyone kind of maybe somewhat knew that this could be happening, seeing the Anakin Clone Wars attire there, and now we've actually got it. So when you see it, you believe it, and it's like, dude. Hayden Christensen coming back, the way the fandom is receiving him, the way that Dave Filoni is doing justice to what I think a lot of us, if we were ever to see him again, especially with Ahsoka, you know, would want to see. Like, he's doing what we would want to see right here. And I have to say that the young Ahsoka, played by Ariana Greenblatt, who also played young Gamora, she is fantastic. Like, really, really, really good. You already got the vibes here just when she was talking to Anakin. But later on, where we saw her going ham at like the Siege of Mandalore, that was like, oh my god, this is... I don't know what better casting you could have got for this era of Ahsoka Tano. But this is where we saw Anakin, I believe, talking to a couple of Twi'leks, even Rex, which was awesome. We saw Rex again in the next scene in Clone Commander mode. And Ahsoka, this is where she's feeling the guilt. And I quite like this reference because she says that it was my fault. They were following my orders. I got them killed. Now, what this is a reference to is the storm over Ryloth, and where Ahsoka more or less kind of disobeyed Anakin, and it led to most of her squadron losing their lives. Now, the thing is, I don't believe that it was portrayed on the ground like this. It was quite literally, as per the title, over Ryloth. But it seems maybe the way they wanted to handle it here is to show a bit more of the familiar Clone Wars iconography with the various vehicles, you know, clone troopers running on the ground, on the sand, rather than just a space setting, if you will. But you could, I guess, argue that maybe this is a scene in between those scenes that we've seen before. Star Wars does this quite often, where they kind of insert an extra bit that we didn't necessarily know about. They also talk about that this isn't what I was trained for. This is just a larger conversation, really, that symbolizes the prequel era, the fall of the Jedi, how they somewhat kind of lost their path, lost their way, because the Jedi, as we all know, they quite simply went down a path that wasn't so much what they would have really ever intended. As Yoda says, a Jedi uses the Force in knowledge and defense, or for knowledge and defense, never for attack. And I think we can all agree that the Jedi bent those rules more and more during the days of the Clone Wars, for the effort, though, to be peacekeepers and keep peace in a way that they wouldn't have normally have done during quite a horrific time. And my god, as Anakin leaves that conversation, goes back into the battle, when he flashes into Vader, this shot was amazing, but when he just flashes into Vader in that moment as well, that is just That is so cool. And then, again, I kind of don't really want to talk about this. I just want to keep talking about the Anakin and Ahsoka stuff. We cut back to Jason looking at the X-Wing, searching for Ahsoka. And I just thought, man, this kid really needs to be trained in the ways of the Force. And I still think that this begs the question of what the heck is Luke doing at this time. We know that this is after the Mandalorian scene, the Book of Boba Fett scenes of when Ahsoka was hanging out with Luke. And right there and then, he's building a Jedi temple. But I do argue, without trying to nitpick here, the brick building of what he was doing with the droids, building little temple huts, that can be put aside for a second, or leave the robots freaking creating that. Leave them doing it. I know in all reality, we're not going to have CGI Luke every episode, so this is the grounded reason as to why we're not seeing him. But I do think that they should have probably addressed right now what the heck Luke Skywalker is doing. We have a little funny moment between Hera and Huyang, in where Hera's just like, where are they? People just don't vanish into thin air. And we have Huyang literally say, well, no, normally no. And that's because, you know, sometimes people kind of do vanish into thin air. And she asks what Ahsoka's master was like. And his response was pretty funny. It was like, intense. This is where we cut immediately back to Ahsoka, dual-wielding lightsabers at the Siege of Mandalore, taking out super commandos in Death Watch. It is just... Again, just to keep praising it, I feel like they did a really good job showing the fluency of her combat, because as we know, animation is kind of like crazy with the things you can pull off, but the acrobatics of Ahsoka here and the way that they were pulling that off with the choreography was pretty damn good. So this is when we have Anakin pop up again, back in his normal attire. This is when we get some interesting dialogue from Anakin, responding to Ahsoka saying, is that all? You know, when he said, you're a warrior now, as I trained you to be. But he goes on to say, Ahsoka, within you will be everything I am. All the knowledge I possess, just as I inherited knowledge from my master and he from his. You're a part of a legacy. Now, this is where we get Baylan Skoll's line in what he said to Ahsoka during their fight. But my part of the legacy is one of death and war. And Anakin responds back by saying, but you're more than that because I'm more than that. And you would have to say that that's a reference to... You know, he's more than just his kind of legacy of what he did as Darth Vader, the absolute horrific. Like, if you really think about it, guys, remove your bias, the stuff that he did, slaughtering younglings, even if you put that aside, all of the stuff he did in canon as Darth Vader, hunting after people, Jedi, the Jedi all of this stuff. He's more than that, guys. He's not only that. And this is when Ahsoka kind of digs into that a bit more. She says, you are more Anakin, but more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized. Now, this is where it could have gone into a conversation about, okay, Anakin, let's kind of talk about what happened when you went to the dark side. I'm not grilling you, but let's like briefly talk about it. And I feel like the reason why they avoided it is because any kind of talking about Anakin Skywalker, who's come back to the light, it's still hard to move past the crimes that he committed. So it is easier, if you want to argue that, to avoid that conversation, because Anakin replies here saying, oh, is that what this is about? And you can tell he almost gets a bit agitated by this. Ahsoka even presses on, saying, well, if I am everything you are, and he interrupts by saying, you've learned nothing. Back to the beginning, I gave you a choice, live or die. And at this moment, guys, things get crazy. He looks dark. He's got the red lightsaber equipped. He's got yellow Sith eyes. And I love the imagery here with Anakin just snapping back and forth between both Vader and Anakin. He says you lack conviction, and you can hear the somewhat voice modulation in where they try to blend the Anakin voice with the Vader voice. Now, when you see him just marching with such command here and tenacity, if you will, as Huyang says, intensity. This is somewhat the Vader. Well, it's not somewhat. This is the Darth Vader that Palpatine wanted. One thing I liked with the choreography, somewhat symbolizing something else here, when Anakin was striking with his red lightsaber, sure, the combat was still fluid, but it was a lot more precise. Whereas at the beginning, when we saw Anakin fighting Ahsoka, it was a lot more swooshy, as per the prequels, a lot more of that choreography. But here with Vader, just like when we see Vader fight, it's a lot more powerful. Kind of like Baylan Skoll's stance, you know, where it's a lot more heavier, like Vader's. So that was a nice bit of attention to detail there. But as the sabers lock, Anakin says, time to die, but Ahsoka disarms Anakin. And once again, love the Sith eyes. Even as the lightsaber moved up to Ahsoka's face, you could tell that they added a little Sith hue yellow there, as if to symbolize the whole, if I am everything, you are. But she doesn't give in, and she throws the lightsaber away and says, I choose to live. And this is when Anakin starts backing away, somewhat stepping out of his Vader mode, breathing quite heavily, you know, calming down with each step he takes back. And he goes back into the light side version, and he smiles and says, then there's hope for you yet. And this is when he disappears. Now, let's break this down for a second. The way he stepped back there and went from dark to light, it really is as though, and this is why I choose to believe that this is Force Ghost version of Anakin. Like with post Return of the Jedi, this, whether you want to call this more of a Force vision, world between worlds, but not necessarily the exact world between worlds that Ezra was at with Ahsoka beforehand, I still believe this connection that Ahsoka is establishing with Anakin is one of legitimacy by the Force, obviously, because she's on the brink of life and death. She's having like a near-death experience, but that doesn't negate her actual connection to the Force Ghost Anakin that I believe is happening here. But what I like about with what we've seen with these Vader scenes and the Anakin scenes, and you can see that it's not just necessarily for show, like, oh, I'm going to do a deliberate test and go into Vader mode. He has to like breathe and get himself out of it. But it shows that he's somewhat fulfilling his chosen one mode, balancing the Force, almost in the sense of like the Mortis father, even the son and the daughter, like as if he's, you know, all of them in one. Maybe some of you would say he's more the father here, which is fair enough. But through his ability to go dark here, calm that down, breathe heavily, but calm it down, go back into the light. It shows per the chosen one, per the balance that he's supposed to bring, that he has full control, that he can balance. And all of this somewhat symbolizes, and what Anakin has been teaching her here is, you know, through going into the dark Anakin modes is to fight for the life, because she chooses to live, as Ahsoka says. There is hope for you yet. There is now this ability to come back as a more optimistic version of yourself, and that is truly what is being recognized here. And you can clearly tell that with the end of this episode, because Ahsoka now, as the world between worlds somewhat transitions away and she's in the water, and it's like literally a baptism is happening as she gets immersed into the water, signifying that change into Ahsoka the White, plus the attitude that we had before of the more, as what I've said and what a lot of people have said, the perhaps deliberate choice to portray Rosario Dawson's Ahsoka beforehand as wooden. Sure, she has smiled, and this isn't any knock on Rosario Dawson's acting, but a lot of us were like, okay, sure, she's older, sure, she's wiser, sure, she might be a bit more melancholy, but is there not something more? But here you can now see the full transitional wave happen, because ever since she now comes back and Hoyang greets her, and she's in literally the white robes, so they've kind of done a mini retcon there, because now she's in the white robes compared to the scene we saw before of when she collects Sabine to go search for Ezra. It's literally a Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White moment, where he's like, I've been sent back until my task is done. Not saying that Ahsoka, as soon as she saves Ezra and defeats Thrawn, that she's going to die or just go away. But it is very Gandalf with the quotes of when he says, I've come back to you now at the turn of the tide. It is truly like Ahsoka has come back in the version of herself now, in where we're going to get a lot more. I'm not saying she's going to be like youthful snips, but she's for sure, as per the end of this episode, it's like she doesn't stop smiling. It's great. And this is the Ahsoka we've wanted, but there's been a very deliberate arc getting her to this place, and a character backstory that she struggled with. So this is when we have Ahsoka in her white robe. She greets Jason. He asks who she was fighting with, and she seems very interested that he had the ability to hear that. So, you know, me talking about Luke earlier, it'd be pretty cool if maybe Ahsoka takes on Jason for a bit of training in addition to Sabine. That could be very well where things go. And it turns out that Ahsoka uses psychometry, which is basically what Cal Kestis uses in Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, to hear those echoes, the memories, the impressions that Ahsoka was even on about here with Sabine. And this is where, yeah, Ahsoka got all the answers that she needed. Now, at this point, the New Republic are on their way because they've just run out of patience. Meanwhile, Ahsoka is looking at the sky, noticing the Purgle, and is like, oh, that'd be kind of handy, but I'm not gonna lie, maybe that idea could have maybe occurred to you guys way before this. You knew that Ezra used Purrgil. Did you really need the star map? You could have tried this ages ago. But with Hera, she's getting an absolute whacking by the New Republic. Well, not really. Mon Mothma is on her side, but she's asking if Morgan Elsbeth is in custody. Nope. Evidence of Imperial remnant activity or Thrawn's return. Well, not there, but you've got more than enough evidence, as I've pointed out. She's saying, well, there's nothing more I can do, and she's even saying that the Senate committee is going to determine if her command should be permanently suspended. But I was also thinking, well, you kind of do have some new evidence. I mean, think about it. Ahsoka has got the evidence that Huyang scanned of the giant-ass Eye of Sion, quite literally proving stolen hyperdrives are being used, and this isn't being built for any small task. This is some big concern. So there's some evidence there. They literally have scans of the Eye. There's evidence of a lightsaber destroyed star map. All of this could have maybe have been given to Hera before Ahsoka left, but let's not ask questions. So now, very end of the episode, essentially, we have Ahsoka go out on top of the ship, communicate with the Purrgil using the Force. The Purrgil flies right up to Ahsoka's face, and I have to admit, in this particular shot here, it looks pretty cute. But the thing is, despite connecting with the Purrgil with the Force, she tells Huyang that she has no idea where it's going to go, nor even if it knows where Sabine is. So I'm guessing with the Force, she just kind of got a vibe check of the Purrgil, saying, yeah, hop in my mouth, and that's it. And Ahsoka was just being optimistic, like, yeah, let's just see where it goes. It doesn't matter. And this is what I mean. Like, Ahsoka's kind of very jolly Ahsoka the White mode now. And so the Purrgil charge up for the hyperspace jump. She says goodbye to Hera. May the Force be with you. And off they go. And that was a really cool ending. Like, I know I skipped past quite a bit of it there, but, you know, the soundtrack that was playing, the Purrgil flying out the atmosphere past the fleet, all of it was so grand, so cool. And seriously, when we pick up from where Ahsoka has arrived in this other galaxy, you have to think things are going to get extremely nuts from here on out. I would have loved to have had Hera go with them, so I wonder what scenes we're going to see in upcoming episodes. Are we going to kind of do what we did in this episode, jump from Ahsoka and Morgan Elsbeth and Baylan and everyone in that other galaxy, but to then Hera in the New Republic getting freaking, you know, shouted at by the senators? We're going to have to wait and see. But overall, guys, I love this episode. I loved it so much for obvious self-explanatory reasons. I don't really think there's much I would say. Like, sure, I would have maybe liked to have seen Anakin and Ahsoka maybe talk a bit more about the obvious stuff maybe you wouldn't want to talk about, but I understand how hard that is to execute in a way that doesn't warrant a 2-hour sit-down conversation. Like, writing dialogue for that in an episode with only so much screen time to visit what Vader's done, even when Order 66 happened, let alone everything after that, it is very hard to do. So they barely got onto that, but I don't really know what more I could have wanted, to be honest. Maybe actually more acknowledgement of, but this was maybe deliberately ambiguous, of Anakin's current status. To me, I think it is obvious. I know some people out there will completely disagree with me and think that this is all just the will of the Force and it's not really Anakin. I say no, because since we know Anakin is quite literally a Force ghost, there's no reason to not believe that this is Anakin, just presenting himself in a bit of a Force vision, if you want to kind of meet me halfway there. But it still is and has happened with both their Force spirits, if you will. But maybe a bit more addressing of where are we, what is going on right now. Like, maybe a bit more on the surface dialogue, but maybe you could argue to me that's being spoon-fed a bit too much. And I'm sure Dave Filoni will open up about this a bit more. But I do think, even without him opening up about it and, you know, fans asking him questions and he gets a bit more into the meat of it, I think he will say that the design is such that that was post-Return of the Jedi Anakin Skywalker communicating with his apprentice. One thing that would be really cool for Filoni to open up about is maybe if he does have a bit of a responsibility or role like the father in terms of Mortis speak, which would be pretty awesome to hear about, because it seems like he really is like balancing all sides of the Force there. So I loved it, guys. Can't wait to catapult into next week's episode. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know your own takes, your own interpretations of what we saw in episode 5. What was your favorite moment? I can't wait to see what you have to say. Like this video if you did enjoy it. Consider subscribing for more Star Wars content and other videos on the channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and may the Force be with you always.